and welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. It's 9 days till the draft. It can't come around quick enough. It feels like these picks will finally turn the page into this new era. Hope you enjoyed the Easter Friday edition. Good to get something out over the weekend, and thanks everybody for commenting and listening on YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribe, give it a like, keep going out of the draft. Profiles have certainly racked up the views, but we can always get more people to come and join us. This week to join us is a first time guest, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Oliver Hodgkins from Pro Football Network.
So my latest one, which came out just at the start of April, just after the Deshaun Watson trade, actually. Evan Neal, 103, the offensive tackle out of Alabama. I just feel like the Texans have got to find out what they've got in Davis Mills this year. I suspect ensuring that you can protect him is going to be the key to that. Evan Neal is, for me, the top offensive tackle in the class. I think he offers you the positional versatility, a natural versatility, not just saying a guy can flip from left to right. Evan Neal is a guy that has experience at left tackle, right tackle, and guard. So you're comfortable as an NFL team taking a guy like Evan Neal, knowing he can hold down either of those bookend spots. Now, obviously, Laramie Tunsil's there at the moment at left tackle, so you would imagine Evan Neal come in and play right tackle this year. So
people will get upset. So people probably listening will get upset, but I see it on Texans Twitter all the time. And I personally, I've got money on Evan Neal going number 3 overall, so that takes my box, right? but so obviously we drafted Titus Howard. There isn't much hay in the barn, and people are quite precious about these guys, certainly in the Texans fan, because you're not got a lot to hold on, and so people over glamorize people like Titus Howard, and he's been good. He was good at left tackle, and the PFF grade certainly stacked up, if you want to believe them, for offensive linemen. But there's a lot of people that are, I think him and Ike Ekwonu, for us, if you can kick them inside to guard, and then that gives you options at either side of your 5 in a couple of years' time, that's fine, and that gives you options. And the play that I took away watching Evan Neal was, and I used the word crumpled because he did crumple DeMarvin Leal, who was going to be a top 5 pick this year. His stock plummeted. Talked about him quite a bit. I think he could be a steal for a team because I think he just kind of checked out in some ways. But he just crumpled him in the run game. And I just thought, yeah, absolutely. If you can do it to him, who's sitting at 280, who's potentially being talked about defensive tackle on the edge, you can do it against anybody. But how do you see Evan Neal in terms of kind of the wider landscape of talent? And what do you think his ceiling is? And I know he's coming in with, obviously, he's a great fit for Pep Hamilton, ran power predominantly at Bama. What do you think his ceiling is, and how good could he be? Because I know people have said he's not as good as the previous year's class. He wouldn't be picked, first out of those. But do you think he's like the safest guy? And what do you think his ceiling is?
Yeah, and this is the problem, I think, with NFL draft, is that people want to compare to previous or future. Look, you can't impact what happened in the previous years. You can't be certain about what happens in future years. You can only deal with what you're dealing with right now. And right now, Evan Neal, for me, is not just the safest, but the best offensive tackle in the class. We talked about the positional versatility, and that's natural positional versatility. It's not, like we said, asking a guy like Ike Ekwonu, who's never played right tackle, to play right tackle at the next level. That's a projection. Now, with Evan Neal, it's not a projection. So, wherever you're saying someone can do something because they've proven that they can, that's a tick in the box if you're looking at safety as a prospect. So the versatility, but I love the size, obviously, with Evan Neal, a guy that's 6'7", chiseled at 337. I think he weighed in at the combine off the top of my head.
It was impressive.
But I wish I looked like that. And
300,
his footwork is incredible for me. I think one of the key things that you have to look at with offensive line play is footwork and the hands. And Evan Neal ticks the boxes there. He's not a perfect prospect, and no one is. People will go back and look at Penei Sewell in last year's class. And the impact that him and like Rashawn Slater made for the Los Angeles Chargers. They weren't perfect prospects coming out. There's still elements to develop in their game. Evan Neal still has elements to develop in his game. He can be prone to leaning on pass rushers around the outside track, and if then they flip direction, that leaves him to susceptible to the guy coming back on the interior. But for me, he's the safest and he's the best of the three top offensive tackle prospects, and that versatility for me. If I was a Jacksonville Jaguar, I've said this multiple times.
Why they take him? Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
You take Evan Neal because you've invested in Trevor Lawrence. Now you have to invest in protecting him, and you can't get a tackle of Evan Neal's caliber at the top of the second round. You can get a day one starting pass rusher at the top of the second round. You cannot get an offensive tackle like that. So we'll see. But if he's there for the Texans at 3, I think they have to snap their arms off, to be honest.
And who did you have going 1 and 2 just before we kick on?
So Trayvon Walker. So in the mock draft that I did, I had Trayvon Walker going 1 because there was an element of what we're hearing. I wanted to try and convey a mixture of what we're hearing, what I would do, and what sort of previous draft classes and tendencies for organizations tend to lean towards. There's a lot of noise about Trayvon Walker going number 1 to the Jaguars. So I had Trayvon at 1 and then Aiden Hutchinson.
But anyway, 13, if you want to give us some of the guys that were off the board as well, probably, but who did you take at 13 in this mock?
So with Evan Neal secured at 3, took George Karlaftis at 13. The top guys, I say the top guys, Karlaftis is the top guy for me. But Jermaine Johnson was already gone. A couple of the wide receivers, I think, off the top of my head. It's been a while since I wrote this mock draft, but certainly Garrett Wilson was off the board, who is a guy I like for the Texans fit. But yeah, Hutchinson was obviously gone. Trayvon Walker was gone. Jermaine Johnson was gone. Kayvon Thibodeau was gone. Kyle Hamilton was gone. And George Karlaftis for me. We talked about the JJ Watt effect. And I think for me, Karlaftis is that big, powerful pass rusher who doesn't get credit for the nuances that he brings to the position. And I know, like we say, the Texans have flipped to the 4-3 base defense. How often do you play 4-3? How, in terms of disguising fronts? Karlaftis is a guy who you can see work the outside track, but he's also strong and powerful enough to work 3 or 5 inside.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So he brings you that big, powerful, strong. And I keep harking it back to it. Where the Texans are concerned, I think for long-term success with a defensive coordinator in Lovie Smith as a head coach, you want to get back to those days with JJ Watt. I don't want to say Brian Cushing because obviously Cushing's kind of checkered past, but that physical defensive mindset, that strong, powerful defense that helped drive the Texans' success in the early parts of, the 2000s when JJ Watt was there. So for me, George Karlaftis is a guy that can help do that. 13, I think some people probably think he's a little rich for Karlaftis. He's a top 10 player for me. So I think 13 is pretty good value.
Yeah, I struggle with Karlaftis, and at times I've got him. I'm ranked as like in the second tier on the horizontal, first player in the second tier. I've got my fourth outside player and 4-3. As I said, I've got Jermaine Johnson's a 3-4, the only Premier sort of 3-4 guy in outside linebacker in this class. But in terms of the Karlaftis, what? And I don't know the answer to this, and I've watched the tape and I can't work out. So if you watch Notre Dame, if you watch Wisconsin, if you watch all these games that he played in, multiple games, he is impactful. He makes plays. But when you watch games like Ohio State and even Michigan State to a degree, it's just nowhere near the level. What do you think that is?
I honestly don't know. And this is one of the big knocks on Karlaftis is the disappearance, if you like, if you want to use that word, against like teams like Ohio State. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think the perception of Karlaftis is he's not flashy. He's not a flashy pass rusher. No. And that's why there's the big knock on his draft stock is, he doesn't wow you play after play like a guy like, Kayvon Thibodeau does, or, Jermaine Johnson does, or, Trayvon Walker with his athletic prowess. He wows you. I when I did Trayvon Walker's scouting report, there's games where you're like, well, he's there, but then next minute he's there. He's like the lateral agility and the athleticism is insane. And I don't think Karlaftis possesses that. Look, you look at a lot of prospects in this class. Every prospect has a bad game. and sometimes it's prone to overthinking it. You know, a game against like Ohio State is, you know, you expect to see your guys be at the top of their game. It doesn't always work out like that, unfortunately. Sometimes guys, you know, they do have bad games. I think George Karlaftis does have the power, the strength, and nuances. I think he's more athletic than a lot of people give him credit for. I think you get him in an NFL program. He's I don't say he's relatively inexperienced, but he doesn't come from a footballing background as well. So there is some work to do there potentially. But I think the Texans, if you get a guy like Karlaftis at 13, that's a real strong anchor for your defensive front.
Yeah, there's one play that just sticks in my head against Ohio State, and they ran at him, and he was going against Petit Frere on the edge. I'm not that high on, but he certainly seemed like to get the better of him. There's one play where he's basically got he's got his back to the play as the running back is breaking through the line. And I don't know if it was from memory, I think that was pretty an uneven game, and you know there's a lot of plays, you know, so he'll be rushing a lot more than he would be if he's on the field, you know, at the NFL level, because you know there's simply more passing plays at college. But yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth with Karlaftis, but I think I keep going back to the point, Ollie. I think 13 is a potential dead spot, just falling out of those top two tiers that I was talking about, and it may be one that you want to obviously trade back if you can. Perhaps easier to trade out of than 3 would be. Do you kind of see it as maybe being like a spot where you, as you said, you know, getting that spot at 13 might not be any different to sort of 23, for example?
Yeah, there's several like spots like that for numerous teams. You know, I think intriguingly, I think where the New Orleans Saints have traded themselves into, if their intention is to get an offensive tackle and a wide receiver, I feel like they're in a bit of a blind spot where offensive tackle is concerned, because I would expect, and it's not a guarantee, you never know what happens in the draft, but I would expect the top 3 guys that we've talked about on this podcast, Neal, Cross, and Ekwonu, to be gone. That's too high for Trevor Penning for my money. I know a lot of NFL teams do like him, so the potential is there. But then they're in a dead spot. Like the Texans are in a dead spot at 13 in terms of drafting for need over best player available. It very much depends how the board falls. If a guy like Kyle Hamilton's still there at 13, well, you're not trading out of that. You're snapping Kyle Hamilton up and you're succeeding for the next 5 years bare minimum.
But yeah, I remember went to the 2019 draft. I was sitting there at the stage and watching it come, the picks start coming in, and you know, at that point, you wanted as many quarterbacks to go before we took 18, 19, I think it was, when we got Titus Hubbard, because that wasn't your need. And I'm not saying, I'm not anointing Davis Mills. I'm not dismissing him neither. We'll find out, you know, by the bye week this year, we'll have a proper evaluation, I think. But at that point, then you wanted the quarterbacks to go, and I think it's kind of the same. You want somebody to go up and get Willis. You want somebody to go up and maybe get Pickett. I don't know if they will, but you know, there's a few questions, and if that happens, that plays into Houston's hands in terms of how we expect. I mean, they may shock us all, but I doubt it. You know, that's how. So definitely, that's where we want to happen. Who did you have at 37? If you got it there,
I had Daxton Hill going at 37. We talked about the safety position earlier and the versatility. I think Daxton Hill gives you an athletic freak who can play in a number of alignments across the defensive backfield. I think when you're a team that has got a lot of holes to fill, and Daxton Hill falling to 37 is. He's very highly rated. 37. He's almost a steal if you can get him.
Yeah,
at 37.
I was going to say, I wouldn't expect to see him that. Perhaps that.
Okay. Yeah, superb athlete. Incredibly versatile. Reads the game very well. I think the one thing for Daxton Hill, in terms of coming downhill, he isn't the biggest guy, and you see that on tape. Sometimes he does struggle to impose his will when he comes downhill. But I think that as a coverage safety and the ability to play, you know, slot cornerback, even he's got the size to play outside. That's a guy who can impact, you know, 5 different positions on your secondary with a second round pick, I think it's pretty decent value there.
Yeah, one of the games I watched, I can't remember, it was one of the high scoring games. I think it was Michigan State. I just wrote down he gets a little nosy at times. You know, he comes up and you can almost see him like he's just want to get involved too much. And I think he may learn some harsh lessons. I kind of thought, which all rookies do, right? So it's not unique to Daxton Hill at all. But yeah, I just thought I thought movement. Yeah, checked all the boxes. Yeah, he's probably. I kind of sort of had I hate giving rounds on people because I was talking about this last week. It just takes one team like Seattle who throw the whole thing off, and it's like there's a couple of guys in the first their first rounds or whatever, in the third or what have you. Yeah, I just kind of thought he got a little bit nosy at times, but his movement skills were there. It looks like like a player, and it looks like he's got a lot of attitude. When he's playing and communicating secondary, which you need, and I think you're talking about the strength and defense. This team needs to build an identity to somebody like that. I think would be a good fit. Your colleague here, Sky Moore, slot receiver, Sky with two Y's. What do you think of him? Certainly silky smooth from the couple of games I watched. Slippery in his routes. Definitely got a propensity to get open in the short to intermediate areas. Level of competition, obviously Western Michigan is something that potentially your colleague here compares him to Golden Tate. What do you think of Sky Moore?
He's to steal a phrase from another one of my colleagues. He's explosive in all directions. So he's a kid who can stretch the field vertically with vertical explosion. He can explode and gain separation in very short routes. Yep. I actually had Sky Moore going at 68 in the top of the third round to the Texans in my mock. Okay. It feels like that's probably unlikely at the moment. He's certainly getting up ahead of steam. I know there's a lot of guys who like him as even potentially that back end of round one. Round one area. That's a little high for me. But I do think he is an extremely explosive wide receiver threat who can, we talked about Garrett Wilson's ability to create yardage for you. Sky Moore's a guy who can create yardage for fun. So he would be a great addition to the Texans. And like I say, I hired him at the top of the third at 68. So I think probably a little bit late in the day, unfortunately. But just sometimes, like you say, you don't know how the board falls. There's always that. Never say never. It's not. Don't deal in absolutes during the NFL draft season.
Nothing. I mean, even the teams get it wrong. So we know what. Brandon Smith is the linebacker from Penn State. Your colleague's got it 60. I wasn't quite sure watching him. He's a little bit on the heavier side for an off-the-ball linebacker. I don't know if he necessarily fit at the Sam or Will, but what do you think of Brandon Smith? And is he a 3-4 true outside linebacker?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I don't think he's a true 3-4 outside linebacker. Brandon Smith's a super interesting guy because you mentioned there he's a bigger guy. He's a very, very good athlete, a very explosive athlete. Comes downhill well, gets after the quarterback well. He's one of them that is very inconsistent. This is the big thing for me. He was a guy who I watched before the season. I was like, if this guy kicks on, he could be one of the top linebackers in this class. And he's just inconsistent. Yeah. But he's got all the athletic attributes, plays the game with physicality, plays the game with a level of intelligence that you want to see out of a linebacker. We talked about at the top of the show, the linebacker position's one that's ever morphing, and there's so much responsibility in terms of pass rush, pass coverage, stopping the run, the zone man alignment. There's so much going on at the linebacker position that you have to be a high level intellect as well as athlete. And I think Brandon Smith shows that he can be those things. He's just too inconsistent at this moment in time. So again, it comes down to that projection versus safety and surety. And I think Brandon Smith projects to be an impressive player, but at the moment there's not that surety with him as a prospect. Yeah, I've got him as
I've ranked him as a spot filler right now in the 4-3 off ball linebacker, just because I think he is good at rushing, but then ultimately he'll either be a 3-4 or a 4-3 outside linebacker rushing. So I'd struggle to I ranked him really closely to Darian Beavers, because I think Beavers he's got a hell of a rush, but he's a bit big for a linebacker, and I kind of ranked them very close together because I thought albeit they do a lot of different stuff, but in terms of a little bit on the heavier side, not necessarily, they're okay dropping in zone coverage, but if you asked them to go up and face up a tight end and press, they're probably going to get caught out by the more athletic guys. So interesting one. Who did you have at 80?
Isaiah Spiller, running back out of Texas A&M.
Right.
And I absolutely love Isaiah Spiller. The Texans running back room is super intriguing to me because you look at the two guys that are currently at the top of the depth chart, Marlon Mack and Rex Burkhead. Yeah. They're two guys who are, so, but pass catching running backs. So if you're the Texans looking at this draft class, what is it you want out of this draft class? Because you've already got two sort of pass catching guys in Mack and Burkhead. Royce Freeman, you've got in there, and Dario Gabali. Yeah, I don't think I did a great job of pronouncing his name, but Isaiah Spiller for me is his testing has forced him not under the radar. It's forced him down draft boards. For me, I don't think that testing is important when you look at how Isaiah Spiller wins, and his footwork is incredible. His physicality and his build for the running back position is perfect for the NFL level. His vision is incredible. He's my top ranked running back in this class, and I know he's not going to go as the top running back because a guy like Breece Hall with his explosion, Kenneth Walker with his ability to cut and create, and the speed that both of those two showed at the NFL Combine and on their college tape is probably going to make him more alluring for NFL teams. But if you want a guy who you can bring in and can catch out the backfield, can pass protect, can create yardage with his vision and his footwork and his ability to absorb contact, I think Isaiah Spiller is that guy, and you probably are going to be able to get him in the third round at like pick 80 just because of how his stock's falling.
Yeah, he takes one to the house against Oklahoma, and there is no shortage of long speed there. None of the DBs catch up against them against a good defense. I'm sure that was the game at AT&T Stadium, and they were I think some of the knocks and some of the straight line speed. I don't think that's his game. I think he's kind of those one cut. He's very, very patient before he hits the hole, and I do like him. I know they kind of ran a bit more of an inside zone game. Do you ever kind of find the translation, and I know a hole's a hole, right, in terms of in the running game, and one for a better phrase, right? But I think it's do you find that guys who come through a zone scheme in college 3 years struggle to kind of adapt to a power scheme, which Pep Hamilton we expect will run? Do you think that's an issue? That was one question I had in my head I wasn't sure of.
I think it depends on your football intelligence, right? We talked about this at some of the other positions. Scheme fit is huge, and if you, like you say, you have played 3 years in one scheme, sometimes prospects do find it difficult to transition to a different scheme at the NFL level. I think Isaiah Spiller is a guy who has got the football intelligence to be able to come in, and certainly in a power scheme, he's got that physicality, he's got that frame to grind out yardage up the middle. So I don't worry about Isaiah Spiller's ability to translate to a different scheme at the NFL level.
Yeah. No, did you say you had a fourth round?
Yes, fourth round. So I got back-to-back picks, 107 and 108. Mario Goodrich, the cornerback out of Clemson.
Yeah, he's a nickel, right?
I think he can play outside as well, to be honest. And what I love about both Clemson cornerbacks is they're so physical and aggressive against the run. Yeah. And you talked about being tone setters for this Texans defense, getting guys in who can come in with an attitude and get down to work and play physical and aggressive football. I think Mario Goodrich is kind of underrated in his ability to do that. He had an incredible ascension this year. In terms of, he didn't play a deal for Clemson the first 2 or 3 seasons, but the same can be said of Andrew Booth, who for me is my top ranked cornerback in the class. So I love what Mario Goodrich brings to the field with his physicality, his aggression, his ability to read the game is pretty good too. So when you talk about scheme fits and move, man and zone coverage, he's got the intelligence to be able to read where who's people coming in and out of his zone. So I love Mario Goodrich as an overall prospect. And then 108, I had Damon Clark, the linebacker out of LSU, who stock is obviously an issue with.
Yeah.
But I think a team's going to get a real bargain with Damon Clark as long as they're happy to take the risk on the health panning out long term, because he's a real physical enforcer, plays with a lot of speed in his game. Will hurry back to the football down the field, with again coming back to being a tone setter. That non-stop motor, hard working, bring your lunch bell to work type of guy.
Yeah.